So I just finished my detailed review of the new AP53.
Joe is a funny guy. All right, guys, let's get into it. Everything you need to know about the new Century MKE AP53. All right, before we get started on this, I need to let everyone know that this is going to be a full-length, in-depth, comprehensive review, tip to butt, on Century's new import from MKE, the AP53. This is going to be the go-to video on all information about the AP53, and Joe at Dakota Tactical was gracious enough to help me out. I sent him this gun so he could just go over it, tell me everything there is about it, have the viewers see all the information from a professional builder. And Joe from Dakota Tactical, and Dakota Tactical just in general, is probably the premier roller gun 53 builder. So people like Grantham have a Dakota Tactical 53. They're just high-end, premium built guns. So I knew he'd be the guy to answer the questions that I had and probably everybody had about this gun, as it is an affordable option for the masses. Not everybody can afford a $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 build. This is coming to market at sub 2K. So is this an option for you? Is it quality? Is it good? We're gonna go over it. Thanks, Joe, for helping out. Let's kick it over to Joe, listen to that info. We'll come back, we'll do some shooting.
Thanks, Steve. This is Joe from Dakota Tactical. I'm going to talk to you today briefly about the AP53. There's a lot of buzz on the roller lock communities about it. A competitively priced HK53 clone made in Turkey. We're going to go through it today and show you things that are good about the gun, possibly things that are bad about the gun, what is interchangeable with German parts, what might not be interchangeable with German parts, and essentially what you're getting into when you're looking at this lower price point. One thing that I want to preface that you should keep in mind, a little bit of economics when it comes to roller locks. It's about a 3-to-1 ratio compared to, let's say, an AR-15. There's always some exclusions to the rule, some exceptions here, but typically in general, a $1,500 roller lock is about the same quality, fit, finish expectations as you can get from a $500 AR-15. So again, it's about a 3-to-1 ratio. And again, like I said, there's some exceptions, but that's a good general rule of thumb. And when we dig into this AP53 sample we have here, you can see, where possibly some of that comes to light there. Again, this gun is just one sample of many. I've already gone through this gun in detail. I can tell you that there's some good and bad with this gun. I'm going to cover it all, but keep in mind, again, this is just one sample. However, again, 3-to-1 price point. When you're in that $500 AR-15 price point and you buy, 50 guns of the same price point, you can expect some problems with a good percentage of them. This platform is no different. So without too much delay, we'll go ahead and get started into it. This is the AP53. Overall, initial impressions out of the box, it's a good looking gun. It has a nice finish to it. I can tell you that the paint, it's consistent. It is not a high quality solvent resistant firearms paint. It's a relatively cheap paint. It looks good. Don't expect it to stay looking this good for long, especially if you use the gun a lot. If you use any harsh chemicals, expect this finish to come off fairly easily. But again, price point. You have to consider price point. Right off the bat, I can tell you it's a much different quality of plastic than you will find on a German gun. It is, I'm not going to say it's ABS plastic grade, but it's a cheap plastic. But again, you have to consider the price point. The pictograms, it checks all the boxes as far as looking cool, and the plastic on the handguard, for lack of a better word, are a bit inferior to the German grade plastics. Now, that being said, this is not the correct handguard for an HK53. This is actually an MP5 handguard, and it's evident by length. An actual HK53 handguard is longer, so it covers this voided portion here on the receiver. So if you're handling the gun farther back, you actually have some handguard there to rest your hand against. That being said, this is also a somewhat out of spec MP5 handguard. If you look real close, I'm not sure if the light will catch it, you can see that the pin, push pin, barely protrudes. The locking spring does not pop out the other side of the handguard. As you can see here on the German handguard, the locking spring will pop out. So, for all extent and purposes, there's really not much other than a little bit of friction that's holding this pin in. So keep that in mind. If you're going to stick with the factory handguard, you know, you might need to do some modifications to the handguard to get that pin to go all the way through. The factory German handguard did not fit this sample. We already went through a bunch of things. I've examined some things here. The hanger actually is bent forward, and it's bent forward because it was welded too far back on the tube. So at the factory, they probably took some type of fixture or jig and tried to bend it forward to get this handguard to fit. And when trying to fit a German handguard, the point in which the push pin doesn't fit, the hanger is pushed too far back. The cocking tube is not centered in the front sight frame. It's actually touching a little bit, or almost touching the side of the front sight here. This is very common. In the past, MKE guns, they've put a bushing behind the dust cap to give the semblance of it being centered. You pull that centering bushing out, and the cocking tubes will actually hit the front sight. Now, from further investigation on this particular sample, and I did confirm it with a bore sighter, the rear sight is actually off center. You can see the windage is turned all the way over. Now, if we were to center this rear sight and then retime the front sight to match a center, it would actually correct the tube being off center in the front sight. So my conclusion is that the tube is welded straight, but it gives the impression that it's welded crooked because the front sight is actually canted. And again, that's evident by the rear sight base having the windage shoved all the way over, and I did confirm that with a laser bore sighter. Moving on to the receiver itself, welds all look, you know, they look where they need to be. All the spot welds are in the correct spot. The cocking tube, the way it is cut and inset into the receiver, is actually correct. These welds here, I've heard comments from people that what were they thinking when they did that weld? However, I have here a demilled German HK53 front end, and as you can see, the Germans did the same thing with the welds. So they did weld them correctly as far as style and location of welds. And for all extent and purposes, the rear sight base weld on this gun is actually relatively clean. And I will also note that they use the correct rear sight base. There's two different styles of rear sight bases, one with and without this raised protective guard for the rear sight. This is actually the recoil tab that the claw mount and other mounts will sit into. A G3 rear sight will have a back wall that's the same height as the front wall. 5.56 guns use this elevated one for better protection of the castle drum in case anything comes back and wants to impact it. So they did use, at least on this sample, they used the correct rear sight base. So that's a plus there. The stock cap. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. I will note that on this particular sample, the pin does come out quite easily and it inserts quite easily, about the same quality and fit that you would find on a German gun. So props to them for that. The stock does come off very easily, exactly what you would expect from a German gun. So props for that. However, I will tell you that I have attempted to fit an actual German cap on the back of the gun and it does not fit. The gun is actually stretched out a little bit too wide. I have my speculations about what's going on with that. I'll touch on that briefly right now. These metal caps. On a 5.56 gun, it's one hole. On a G3, it's two holes. Very common practice for people to take a G3 cap, cut it down to one push pin hole, and then make them compatible with 5.56 guns. They will also remove the captive recoil rod assembly and put the proper cup in because a proper HK cap does not have, I don't know if you can see it in there, does not have a captive spring. Rather, it has a cup to interface with a removable recoil rod spring. Okay, so this is proper for all H&K 5.56 guns. This specifically, this length, this spring style, this cap came off of a 53A2. So that all being said, this is captive. So why is there a captive spring in a 5.56 cap? I suspect that this is not a real 5.56 cap. On a 5.56 cap, you will actually see here, I don't know if you can see it, there's a stamping line right through here. Okay, so a 5.56 cap dimensionally on the ears is smaller and tighter than a G3 cap. So you take a G3 cap, however they manufacture it, they cut it to the proper size, and then they put it in some type of tooling, and they restrike the back of the cap to make it a little bit smaller. And again, that's evident because you can see the line, the strike line on each side. Now, the stock that comes with the gun, the cap that comes with the gun, the line is there, but it's very faint. You can see it there, but it's very faint. So I suspect what they did is they took G3 caps, which obviously had the captive spring already inside of it, and they cut the rod to HK53 length, and it is a proper HK53 length, by the way. These two rods are the exact same length. So they cut it down. They put a proper length G3 spring. If you actually look at the two springs, they are different. It's hard to tell, but a proper HK53 spring has fewer coils than this spring, and the gauge of the wire is thicker. If it works, it works. I can't tell you what the engineering thought is behind it of why they used a different gauge wire and coil count, but they did. This spring is the proper gauge wire for a G3. However, they used, obviously they made the spring to the proper length so it doesn't collapse in and lock up on itself. But again, more evidence that they started with a G3 cap and simply then cut it to size, took the back cap, stuck it into some type of mandrel or some type of fixture, and then restruck it. But they just simply didn't strike it, either worn out tooling, whatever the reasons are, second world manufacturing, whatever you want to call it, it's not struck to the same specifications as this cap. This cap, again, does not fit that gun. I have to force it on with a mallet, and then the rear push pin doesn't fit, and then I have to force it off. But again, it is par for the course. These HK53 clones from these other imported HK53 clones from Turkey, Pakistan, wherever they come from, they're not made to the exact German spec. As you can see, they do things a little bit differently here. Fit, things like that, it's not going to be the same. So on this particular sample, this is what we're running into. Line up 10 of these guns, you're going to get a percentage of ones that are spot on, a percentage of ones that are off. Every one is going to be a little bit different. So, but these are some things you need to look out for. This particular sample, this stock that it comes with, or I'm sorry, the brace, it's a brace. This brace and cap that it comes with fits perfectly. German one does not. If you buy the pistol version and you SBR it, and you decide that you want to put a stock on it, a traditional A2 style stock, it does have the correct buffer. So you can't really tell the difference, but this is a G3 buffer. You can see that the piston on it is all one specific shape and size. And if we can get in there and look, you can see that the 5.56 buffer has a step to it, a tapered step. So when you look inside of an A2 stock, if it has that small tapered step, it's a proper 5.56 buffer. If you look and it does not have a step and it's just a small pin like that, that's uniform in size cylinder, it's a G3 HK91 762 buffer. The springs that are inside the buffers, I can't give you with any accuracy whether or not they're the same or they're different. I would assume they would have to be different, which is why possibly they would make a different pin so you could tell them apart. I will tell you that they are interchangeable. I've seen people use, I've seen people use the G3 buffer in the 5.56 guns. I've never seen a 5.56 buffer used in a G3 gun. But for what it's worth, this particular sample came with the correct buffer. So my recommendation is if you want to put an A2 fixed stock on your gun after SBRing it, keep this cap. Don't worry about swapping out the recoil rod. It seems to be adequate. If you got one that fits your gun fine, don't even mess with it. Take the entire assembly apart, rebuild it with an A2 stock, and call it a day. Because like I said, if you buy one that has the correct cap, it may or may not fit. So that follows up to, what if you get one that has a cut G3 cap but has not been restruck? And that's very common. I would say 95% of the A2 stocks made for the HK33, the HK53 that have a metal cap that are available on the market today are going to have a cut down G3 cap that has not been restruck. What does that mean for you? When you put it on your gun, if your receiver is in spec, it's going to wobble up and down. Not a lot, but you're going to have some up and down wobble. The way it should fit, there should be no wobble on the back cap. If you have the incorrect G3 cap that's been cut down, chances are you're going to have a little bit of wobble, if not potentially some excessive wobble if the receiver is in spec. Okay, for this portion of the video, we're going to come at you live from the Eagle's Nest. I'm going to go over some of the more detailed differences between buffered and unbuffered carriers and buffered and unbuffered stocks. Your AP53 will come with an unbuffered carrier. That means the back of the carrier will be smooth. The buffering of the gun takes place in the stock assembly. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but just so you can see, this is what a buffered carrier looks like. You see this piece sticking off the back here? There's a large heavy-duty spring assembly inside, and that is the buffer that buffers the gun. So with this type of carrier, again, this is not what comes in your AP53, but with this type of carrier, you do not need a buffered stock because again, the buffering action is all done in the carrier. But we're going to set that aside. That's all I'm going to say about that. We're going to focus on unbuffered carriers. We're going to focus on unbuffered carriers because that's what comes in your AP53. In an MP5, 9mm, it's not required to be buffered. There's not enough recoil action to necessitate a buffer. But in the rifle calibers, you've got to have a buffer somewhere, either in the carrier or in the stock. And again, AP53, you're going to have it in the stock. I don't have the AP53 with me here, but I do have a German A2 stock. And as you saw earlier in the video from the shop, the buffering assembly in the AP53 is near identical to a German factory buffer. It is correct. So my advice is, if you're going to SBR the gun, to make it simple, because buy the polymer stock section, buy the butt cap. You already have the end cap with the buffer and the recoil rod assembly attached. So it's just a matter of a couple of screws and some bolts. You can take the AR stuff off of there, or the cap, or whatever's on there, and you can assemble yourself and make yourself a compatible stock that will fit the gun. Additionally, the fitment is going to be fine too, because these, as we saw in the video, these caps were kind of made to fit the gun. Some of the German stuff doesn't fit, some of the aftermarket doesn't quite fit right. A lot of you guys that already have these guns are finding that out. But the easiest thing to do, in my opinion, get yourself a stock section, get yourself a butt cap, and then rebuild your existing end cap, your steel end cap that came with the gun. Again, because the buffer and the recoil rod assembly is already in there, and you're good to go. But hey, you want an A3 stock, I get it. You want to look fly on the range, sure. So your other option then is to get an actual HK53 stock. This is a German one. You can see that it has a mechanical buffer in it. It looks a little bit different than the A2 mechanical buffer, but it does have a mechanical buffer. If you get a stock that looks like this on the inside, it's for an MP5. Do not use this stock on the gun. If you get a stock that looks like this on the inside with a big hole, again, no buffer. Do not use it on your gun. You will likely get roller dimples because there is no buffer. You need a buffered stock. So if you can't get your hands on an actual German one, I know Atlantic Firearms carries the MKE brand, as some of the other retailers do as well. I think HK Parts, and look and see if they have the MKE stocks, because the MKE stocks are very similar to this. A little cruder in fit and finish, but they are mechanically buffered properly, and they will work. Looking at some of the other A2 stocks, maybe you don't want to build yourself out the proper A2 stock, and you want to go with an all polymer stock because you found one at the gun show and got a deal. Again, if you look inside, that's an MP5 stock. Did I have a picture there? There is no buffer inside there, just a plate. This is a contract HK53 stock. You might think, oh, it's got a little disc in there, that's a buffer. No, that is not. That's a dampening pad. These guns that these stocks came with were designed to be used with buffered carriers. Very briefly, buffered carrier. And that disc on the back was simply just to dampen the slapping action sound. This is not a buffered stock. So again, A2 stock, make sure it's got a mechanical buffer in there. It looks just like that. A3 stock, make sure it has a mechanical buffer. It looks just like that. One other thing I want to point out on the receiver is this little voided area here. On a German receiver, you don't have this voided area. As long as I've ever seen these MKE receivers, even when they were imported a decade or so ago as flats, they had this void in them. And MKE continues to do that. Again, I'm not sure why. Perhaps they have their own device that goes on the top and they need that for clearance, but a German receiver does not have this voided spot. The rib is solid all the way down. Charging handle, before I forget. So it has what looks to be the new German style rubber charging handle, but it's actually hard plastic. So if you look, the charging handles look almost identical. However, the German one is made of a hard rubber. So it's a bit tactile when you pull on it. This one, it looks rubber, but it's actually hard plastic. I will also note that I have taken this charging assembly apart. It uses a G3 handle. Now, I don't have examples to show you. However, I will say that the G3 charging handle and the proper 556 charging handle are different. Unless you know what you're looking for, you probably won't be able to tell them apart, but they are different. This particular gun, and in fact, all the MKE guns that we've ever taken apart, the 43s and a good number of 43s, as well as this new 53, the handle, it's a G3 style. So if you're going to replace this for whatever reason, do not buy an HK53 charging handle. You have to buy a G3 spec charging handle. Bolt carrier. It's a nice bolt carrier. I'll give you that. The fit finish quality of it, at least of this sample, seems pretty reasonable. The locking piece, I'm not going to take it apart. Well, I'll take it apart here. The locking piece is not marked. It just says, simply, I don't know if you can see it, probably not. It just says AP53 on it. It does not have a degree marking or a number marking indicating what it is. There is some really heavy machining marks in it, you can see. German locking pieces are of a much higher fit and finish quality, and they are marked with a number designation which translates to a specific degree. So it's unknown what degree is in this gun. And the HK53 has 3 different locking pieces based on ammo type and ammo pressure. So we have no idea what it comes with. So that's that. But the firing pin spring, quality of the carrier, fit finish quality of the bolt head seem to be good. This particular bolt head, for whatever reason, was probably mismanufactured, so it's got grinding marks on the back, and you can see it's got some color deviation on the back from the heat of it being put up against what looks like a belt grinder. Yeah, can't really comment on that, but overall, I mean, it looks like a nice bolt head. Materials I can't comment on either. I have an old saying, is you can, grandma can give you the tools and the recipe to her brownies, but that doesn't mean your brownies are ever going to turn out like grandma's. So that's, take that with a grain of salt when you look at some of these internal parts. They have the H&K tooling spec and the specs from the 80s, but it doesn't mean they make it to H&K specifications, as we can see. Let's look at the muzzle. So it's a 4-prong spline flash hider, which is correct for an HK53. It does look different than an HK53 flash hider. You can see the two here, HK53, AP53. The AP53 is a little bit shorter, and it's got this decorative cutout in it. But the most notable difference, the most notable difference is the muzzle thread. So original German guns are metric M15x1 right hand, 1/2 by 28 with splines. So here's where a lot of confusion comes in. Metric muzzle devices are muzzle bottoming, which means the muzzle device squares up against the muzzle. There's actually a wall down inside there. Okay, it's not a wall for a muzzle brake. The muzzle actually seats against that wall, and that is how metric muzzle devices square. It leaves a little bit of a gap, you can see there, between the front sight and the sight tower, because it's bottoming against the muzzle. So if you're going to mount a suppressor to a metric device, you have to get the properly designed muzzle device. For example, the Silencer Co. ASR mount for H&K. We did help them spec out the measurements for the thread well and how it fits. And for all extent and purpose, it is one of the few, if not one of the only, muzzle devices that is a perfect fit for an H&K gun. These will fit 53s, it will fit 93s, G3Ks, G36s, it fits everything. And it does so, and it looks good because it covers the splines. What they did on the AP53, standard 1/2 by 28, 5/8 by 24, standard thread pitches will square, the back of the device will square against a shoulder on the barrel. Well, on an HK53, and for many H&K with a spec barrel, you don't really have a shoulder. You can't square against where the front sight is, because it's just, you might run into issues where it actually touches the front sight, not the barrel. Front sight placement comes into play. It's just not a good gauge or a metric to use for squaring. So what they did is they used the same concept. There's a wall back in there. It is a 1/2 by 28 muzzle bottoming device. So what does that mean for you? It means that all of your 1/2 by 28 suppressors, all of your 1/2 by 28 traditional thread-on muzzle devices might not thread squarely on this gun. There is no shoulder. The good news is, if you look, there's enough material here that a competent gunsmith could pull this barrel out, chuck it up in the lathe, and give you and machine in a shoulder right at where the splines start. The bad news is that your splines will still be exposed, and it gets pretty pricey to have this barrel pulled out and have the turning done to that. If you have one of these and you want to put a 1/2 by 28 muzzle device and you're going to gamble on squaring it against that shoulder, I strongly advise you to use a bore rod to check concentricity to the bore, to make sure that you're not going to get a baffle strike. And I would also double check that very frequently to make sure you didn't get any shift or movement or any marring. If you get any metal displacement because you're going to have a sharp edge into a taper, it's very possible that you're going to gouge it, and then you're going to get some shift and some tilt in your suppressor. Until companies make 1/2 by 28 muzzle bottoming devices for the muzzle or adapters for suppressors, I would really hold off on putting a suppressor on one of these. But again, do whatever you want to do. Just be smart about it and double check with a bore rod. Magazine fit. There are just a couple more things left. Magazine fit is, on this particular sample, it's horrific. I've seen videos from some other people that have had really good results with magazine fit. This particular gun, magazine fit is horrific. I do believe it's repairable, and for those of you who are wondering, all of these problems or any of these potential issues, the hanger, front sight being canted, if by chance you do have a crooked cocking tube, all of those things we can fix here at Dakota Tactical. It's not terribly inexpensive to fix a lot of these things, but it can be fixed. I've got the 2 magazines that the gun came with, all right? Doesn't want to go in. Got to hammer it in. It's snug. There's no movement. Got to pry it out. Magazine 1. Magazine 2, I mean, it doesn't, you really got to whack it to get it in there. And to pull it out, you got to give it a good chug to get it out. So, bad. New production German 30 round magazine. Pops right in. However, if you notice, these magazines have these little feet here, has this little lip right here, okay? These are your over insertion stops. All right, there's nothing in the receiver that prevents magazines from being over inserted. It's these stops right here. So what happens is when you insert a magazine, those feet or those lips come in contact with the edge of the mag well, and that keeps you from over inserting the mag. On this particular mag well, it's stretched too far, and you might not be able to see it in the camera, but the magazine is actually over inserting into the gun. And because it's over inserting into the gun, it has this excessive amount of wobble. Now, that is repairable. We have a mandrel we can stick in here. We can restrike the mag well, get it to the proper shape. It should balance out and fix magazine issues. That's not an expensive repair, but it could mar up the finish depending on how physical we have to get with it. So, again, that's another thing to be mindful of. There's not a lot of consistency in the fit of the mag well. Again, we've seen videos of people with no issues, but there are plenty of people that also have issues. So magazine fitment seems to be all over the place. One last thing I want to cover, and I'm going to assemble the gun for this. This gun had, out of the box, a bolt cap of 17 thousandths of an inch. Now that, for all extent and purpose, is very good. The spec on bolt cap is 10 to 20 thousandths of an inch. Sweet spot being somewhere between 16 and 18 thousandths of an inch. This gun dialed in at 17. So on the surface, we would say, holy crap, we got a gold mine as far as bolt cap goes. However, you may or may not have experience with other rifle caliber roller locks. Unlike the MP5 where it's just a free sliding charging handle, there is a camming action. This handle actually pops out. And when you pop this handle out, there's a camming action in here that pops the carrier out of battery. So then you pull it back, right? And there you go. There is supposed to be a gap between the front of the carrier and the cocking tube. We call it the cocking tube support. It's the large, for lack of a better term, tube that slides in here that the handle attaches to. So when you crack the handle, there's a large tube that gets pushed back. It pushes the carrier back, and that whole action, the whole tube pushes the entire carrier assembly back. Now, when it's in battery, handle forward, there's supposed to be a small gap. That small gap ensures that as this gun is cycling, the carrier is not making impact with the charging assembly. And it also ensures that the gun fully engages in the battery. This particular gun, not the case. So an easy telltale sign is take the handle, give it a little pull. It's not, It's in battery. Take the handle, give it a little pull. See how there's no movement to it at all? That tells me right off the bat that the carrier is pushing against the cocking tube support. If there was a gap there, this would come off the locking detent and there would be a little bit of movement because I'd be able to move the entire assembly back and forth a little bit. I've got zero movement. Now, I have further confirmed that by checking the bolt gap with the charging assembly out. We took the charging assembly out, put the gun back together, checked the bolt gap. Bolt gap went from a 17 down to a 13. That tells me that there's a 4/1000th of an inch interference between the two pieces. That is not correct. Again, I'm not going to tell you how much gap there should be, so you can't just pull the tube out and shave 4/1000th of an inch off. It's a good starter. Take the tube out, shave 4/1000th of an inch off, that puts you at zero, but you still have to have some play. There's got to be some room for movement. Stuff's going to shift, stuff's going to move, bolt gap is going to shrink. That's pretty much it. I'm going to give this gun, well, again, it's kind of unfair because it's just one sample, but I'm going to give it the one bite pizza review grading scale. Nobody gets a 10, right? Nobody gets a 10. So I'm going to give it a 4.8. Based on this sample only, I'm going to give it about a 4.8. So there we have it. That's the tip to butt review of the AP53. If you happen to get one of these and you find that yours has any of the misgivings that this particular sample had, please give us a call at Dakota Tactical. We can be found on the web at www.dakotatactical.com. My wife Amber will be the one answering the phone, and she will be glad to get you squared away with all the information you need on getting your 53 into our hands. And again, we can pretty much address any issues that you have with this gun. Cost will vary depending on what you've got going on, but again, it's a discussion that we can have with you should you run into that problem. Appreciate your time. Again, this is Joe from Dakota Tactical. Thank you. Back to you, Steve.
Guys, save 5% with code SteveMP5 at Monadnock Firearms. They are a friend of the channel. Appreciate their support. Link to their Instagram will be below. Check them out. Save some scratch on stuff just like this. All right, Joe, thanks for all the info, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that for us. I'm sure all the viewers appreciate it as well. Make sure you share this video so everyone has this info, because it's really important for the community to understand what they're getting when they get into something like this. Now, I want to update everyone on what's happened since the filming of Joe when he had the pistol. I decided to send it back, hoping to get a better copy. Sentry did send me this for review, and I contacted them, said, look, this is the issues that's going on with it. They took it back and replaced it. Now, if you had some egregious, issues like I was having, sight towers, front sight towers canted, and magazines don't work, or whatever it is, I would imagine contact them and they'll get you sorted out. But it's worth noting that this is a different one that I had originally. It's since been SBR'd. So this one was in better shape than the previous one that Joe was going over, but it's worth noting that this second one still had some minor issues, just maybe not as bad as the first one. The front sight tower was not crooked on this one, but the push pins on this one are very tight, so I need a mallet and probably a punch to get them in and out, whereas on the original you saw in the video was very easy, which is what you want. So these ones are tight, not the end of the world. It still can be done. We're just LARPing in the backyard, so it's not like I need to field strip this thing in 10 seconds and clean it and put it back together. Not the end of the world. So the stock that's on here is the MKE stock that they offer. So I figured, okay, it's going to go right on. I got from HK Parts. Now, it did go on, but because there's variations, as Joe was saying, in manufacturing overseas, it didn't just slip right on as the butt cap did from the factory and like in the original one that you saw. It was very tight. Once I got it lined up, I had to take a dead blow mallet and just tap it on. I didn't have to beat it on, but I had to tap it. Had to give it a good little few taps for it to seat down into place. So when removing it, it's going to take a little bit of work to get it off, to clean and field strip. But again, not the end of the world. I'll take it because this is the option that I have. He did check everything going on in the front end where it did have that same issue. So I had him go ahead and fix the issue up front, so I don't have to really worry about the reliability or issues of damage or anything down the line. Probably you're going to want to check that on your own to see if it's something that you want to fix or should fix. But again, you're getting into this thing at sub $2,000. So you're saving a bunch of money, even if you decide to spend another $1,000, $2,000 in Cerakoting, refinishing, fixing any issues that might need fixed because you want it fixed for various reasons. You're still way under what it would be for a custom parts kit build, which is, I think, the vast majority of people are going to want to get into something that's that price range, that SP5 price range, that Century, AP5, the PTRs, the Zeniths, that like sub $2,000 roller lock price point, which I think this is amazing. My opinion is amazing for the community to be able to get into this type of firearm for that price. But with that price, as Joe was saying, you're taking some concessions with that price. So understand that. On my old school Surefire lighted handguard, because I feel like it just completes the look. I did have him fix the mag well because the mag well was the issue. It would not seat metal mags properly because those plastic mags are just a little too thick, thicker than the metal mags. So the mag well has to be widened to accommodate that. They do wobble a little bit, which is still kind of normal. So I had him fix the mag well. So this will only run metal mags. The plastic mags are now no good for me. They will not work, but I have so many of the metal, German mags that the plastic mags, I don't mind that. So all that being said, a lot of information. Let's take some shots, see how it goes. So it's worth noting just real quick that so far shooting today, I've got about 200 rounds through it. I've had one jam, and I think it was because of the optic mount here. I couldn't really tell, but it looked like from the playback it ejected and got caught up on the rim of the optic mount and then kind of just stayed in the mag well, so it did not strip a new round. It was just like a stovepipe. So I don't know if that was the gun itself or it was the optic mount. Be that as it may, it was one failure. So far, 200 rounds, one failure. So not the end of the world in my opinion. I think it's worth noting that the 53 was basically designed to take the 25 rounders. That's why you'll see a lot of lowers that have like 0, 1, 25, because for the compact version that this is it's the 8-inch compact version. The compact magazines being 25, and then you just saw me shooting the 30 rounders, which is like the standard, and then of course we have the 40 round sticks. So those are cool, all works, all the same. So let's just run it in 25, and then we'll run a few just out of the 40 just to show you that it works. But again, it's the mag well and it's the mags, it's the same thing, so no big deal there. It does look pretty cool with the 40s in there. Small gun, big magazine, pretty sweet. Alright guys, this video has been long enough. I really just wanted to convey to the audience and have this be a primarily information-packed video. Not so much the shooting. The shooting is important, but I mean, I've been shooting it here. I've got 300 rounds in and on and off camera, so I just had that one jam. Again, I don't think it's the end of the world. It's been fine since then. I've been shooting PMC Bronze 223 just today, so it runs with the low power stuff. I'm happy with this. I love it in the collection to be able to have a roller gun, a 53 in the inventory at the price point that this is offering, just from the factory without doing anything else to it, is just great. For the normal folks who are only like maybe never shoot it or shoot it here and there, I mean, the issues that you might have from the factory, it might not be a big deal to you, and it will never be an issue. So you're getting into this thing for sub 2K. If you want to buy this base gun and you say you want to throw another $1,000, $1,500 into it to get it in really great shape if you need to, again, that's still way less than you would have a professional do a complete custom build like Joe at Dakota. I can't thank Joe enough, and if you're looking to do any kind of custom builds, Dakota builds, anything, please check him out. You won't be disappointed with the quality you get over there. So I really thank him for taking the time and putting some work in on this, going over it for us. We'll do a revisit down the line. Appreciate Century, sending this out to me to check out. I really think they got something here, and it's what the community needed in a roller gun, especially the collectors, people like me who want to get everything they can that's retro from HK or just like the HK brand. And these guns are just prolific, they just stand the test of time, these roller guns. So don't forget Steve, MP5. See you next time.